Welcome, everyone. I'm Wake, your host for Shaman to Shaman, where we bring you interviews, shaman to shaman, healer to healer, teacher to teacher, with shamanic lineage-based healers and teachers from around the world, people just like you. We've invited Madeleine Blanchard to share her stories with you today. Madeleine is a modern shamanic practitioner. She comes to her shamanic practice not as a traditional healer, but as a longtime professional coach. Madeleine is a master certified coach specializing in leadership and management coaching. She is trained through the Foundation for Shamanic Studies and has studied with indigenous shamans to inform her practice. We hope that what she shares will resonate with you and impact your life. We trust that this experience will inform you about a way of being that contributes to the resolution of individual, family, community, and worldly concerns, and furthers the global shamanic community, the vision of Shamans Directory, and that this discussion today will inspire you to add shamanic sessions and experiences to your life, that we may build shamanic community together. Shaman to Shaman is brought to you by Shamans Directory, a dynamic online resource for lineage-based shamans to share themselves, offer medicine, build community, and change the world. To learn more, you can visit online at shamansdirectory.com, on social media, and on our YouTube channel. Today, I'm honored to welcome Madeleine Blanchard to introduce herself to our Shamans Directory community. Welcome, Madeleine.
Thank you. Thank you, Wake. That was an extraordinary introduction. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's extraordinary to have you here. I know that as a professional coach, you're quite with a mature practice, let's say. Uh, you've got so much to do and going on, and I appreciate your time today to share about yourself, how you engaged in the shamanic practice that you have, and what you offer to clients. I know this is going to be a good conversation. How would you like to start?
Well, just in a couple of the things that you said struck a chord with me. And one of them was the use of the term modern, which I think is exactly right because it's juxtaposed with what you said a couple of times, even lineage-based shamanism. So I came to shamanism, by accident. I kind of stumbled into it. Having felt not quite like the others, if you will, my entire life. And it was such a relief to me because it was a worldview that matched my experience for the first time. I was raised in the Catholic Church. Not going to say, anything against that. But for me personally, the amount of cognitive dissonance that I was being asked to tolerate to function in that environment, I just stopped being able to do it, essentially. But I loved it. I loved the sacred nature of bringing people together. I loved the ritual. I loved those moments where you really could hear, I could hear the voice of the divine. And I had a friend when I was a teenager who was like, ooh, I really like getting together with you after church because you're so much nicer. And, I was maybe 14, and I still remember it because I was like, you know, I think that's actually true. So what's going on there? And after having left the church, I devoted essentially my entire adult life to finding a worldview and a community where I didn't have to go 2 + 2 = something other than 4. You know, I didn't have to maneuver cognitively. And I tried a lot. I tried a lot of stuff. I followed Muktananda. You know, I levitated. I saw blue lights. It was great. But one received Shaktipat through him, through Muktananda. And that just, it didn't feel right to me to have a person, a human, because we are so deeply flawed between me and, you know, what's available to us, that this incredible amount of help. So I'm just grateful that I finally did find the shamanic worldview and did find the shamanic community, and that I did have a chance to actually learn from extraordinary teachers and to continue, of course, to learn from extraordinary teachers. I'm finding these days that I'm attracting a lot of other people like me. So modern people who don't have the great benefit, right, of that lineage of growing up in a household or a culture where it's just taken for granted that the spirits are right here and all we need to do is ask. And finding that it's very easy for them to communicate with these spirits, but they don't have any context. They don't have parents or grandparents to help them contextualize what they're experiencing. You know, I sometimes indulge in, oh, I wish, right? I wish I'd grown up with parents, with grandparents, in a culture that didn't make me feel, you know. I mean, I'm very good at passing as, what's the word? I guess normal-ish. But I just appreciate being able to be with people where I don't have to pass.
That's such an inspiring beginning, Madeleine, because you're talking about your own very human experience and what you've been looking for all this time. And I know that you've studied with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies and with the Michael Harner approach to energy medicine or shamanism. How were you drawn in that direction, and what are the values do you feel of that kind of approach? Could you describe it for us?
Sure. I actually started 22 years ago. I went to my very first basic. I'd already found a way to journey to the lower world and the upper world and communicate with my main power animal. And I went to a basic course in New York City through, I think, the Open Center, you know, wouldn't you know? And it was Nan Moss and David Corbin. And I just felt like, oh, this is it. These are my people. This is how I roll. This works for me. Every task, every journey they asked us to do was like worlds were opening up, and it was so extraordinary. And then, of course, you know, life. I just started a business. I was publishing a book. I was getting divorced and remarried to someone across the country, and I had kids, and I had 2 kids, and then I had 4 kids, and life. But I did a journey to ask for help because I'd gotten good at that for a real estate matter. And time was of the essence, and there was a lot of money at stake, and it was a very big deal for maybe my fiance. We weren't married yet at the time, and we needed, I don't even remember why, but we needed to get 2 properties on the market and get them moved very quickly. I think we were buying a house in California. I don't remember, but whatever. So I went and I asked for help. And I have a team of 5 crows. I love it. I can say this, they're still my team, and they help me with all things ordinary reality, real, like literally real estate, material stuff, the mechanics of operating in ordinary reality. And they're very wise and they're very smart, and they give me very good advice. And I went to my crows and I said, we need help, and this is why we need help, and can you help us with this? Well, the next day we got an offer on one of the properties, and that same day people toured another one of the properties and made an offer the day after. And it was like, what? I was literally speechless. And I went back to them and I was like, well, thanks. And they're like, no problem. We got you, sister. And I don't know, it scared me to death. It really scared me because I thought, if I have access to that much power and that much help, I better take a big step back here and study this and figure out what I'm doing, because it felt like fire, right? It felt like I better get trained. And B, I need to be a better person. I need to be able to trust that I didn't have any language for this, right? Now we talk about light workers and walking in beauty, and everyone has their own language for it, but it's like you don't use this access for anything other than good. Because I didn't know any of that. I felt it. I felt like, oh, okay. So I had a lot of other stuff going on. So it took me a long time to finally get back into it. So I kind of like left it. I put it on the shelf for a while. And then when I was finally able to get back to it, I went back. The FSS was all was kind of all I knew. And this was even back now in 2010, 2012. I mean, if you go on the internet now, we have the Shamans Directory. We have, there's more available to people who are like, I think this might be my road. But it was hard to find. So the FSS was what I knew. And they happened to have a workshop in Santa Barbara. And I went. And it was great. And I was like, okay, I'm back. And I went and took a 2-week with Nam Moss again, which was so great. And then I signed up for the 3-year program at that time. So in the meantime, I've taken Daniel For's ancestral medicine class. I loved his book. I felt like it gave me a good foundation in doing ancestor work. The class, it's 500 people on Zoom. And a lot of people who do not have that basic fundamental skill of working with spirits. And he was saying, oh, you can just meditate, or you can, and I'm not saying there aren't other ways, right, to access the wisdom that's available. But there were just a lot of people who really did not have any way to access it. And so his class wasn't for me. And then, of course, traveling around and working with indigenous shamans has been very educational. My first trip was to Mongolia because I thought in my heart that whatever lineage there had been was originated in Mongolia. When I go way back to visit my ancestors, I thought maybe that's Mongolia. What do I know? It's not like they speak English, or that those words for physical locations even existed, right? They didn't know where they were in space by today's maps. Anyway, it turned out not to be my lineage. I still don't know what the lineage is. I'm certain that there is one. And, what's very clear to me when I work with the spirits is they don't work with the time-space continuum. Where we are in space and time is pretty much irrelevant to them. So I feel that my connection with my lineage was lost, but they don't. They know who I am, right? Anyway, back to the FSS. The thing I loved about Michael Harner's work is he came to it as a student, right? He was an anthropologist, and he was just studying it. And then he was like, well, let me try some of these methods that I see these people doing. And he had the experience of being able to work with the spirits. Surprise. Why was he led to that work? I wonder. Not at all. And his mission was simply to teach what he called core shamanism, which were the practices that he found to be fairly consistent across and he didn't study all indigenous cultures, but he studied many, and he noticed that there were consistent practices. Some took different forms, and there were multiple ways of getting to the same outcome, but also initiations. And he thought, well, why don't I collect those and teach those to modern people who really don't have any access, because they're not anthropologists studying this. They have families and day jobs and all of that. And what I loved about, and I can only speak for really working with Nan Moss, anytime someone would ask a question, well, what about this? And what do I do about that? And blah, 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 all these questions. She would say, ask your compassionate helping spirits. I'm not the answer lady. I'm here to create an environment for you to learn these practices, find the ones that work for you, that are You know, and everyone, there were 42 people in my 3-year program, which was extraordinary. And boy, did it make the ritual nights like endless. But you know, everyone found the things that were easy for them, that made sense to them, that was like, oh, wow, that was easy for you. Oh, that you weren't able to do that with that, you know. And it was like there weren't any right answers or wrong answers. It was what worked for you, what made it easy for you to communicate with the spirits. I
Value.
love that.
What I really value of what you're sharing, Madeleine, is not only your process, but letting us know that you found an approach that opened up different alternatives and you found something that's really meaningful for you. And as you say, something that works in daily practice or in practical application. And I believe that is quite valuable. The question I have is back to your team of 5 crows, if we may,
Yeah.
is this something, this connection with allies or compassionate helping spirits, as you say, is this something that someone could establish a relationship with these allies through work with you? Do you need a foundation? Do you need a class setting? Or can you facilitate people in developing these kinds of helpful relationships? What do you suggest? What do you see?
Yeah, you know, my daughter-in-law has been doing a yoga teacher training. And it sounds like they really, it's not just, you know, positions. It's the whole spiritual aspect of yoga. And one of their assignments was to read the 4 agreements, which I thought was wonderful. Um, but yesterday she texted me and she said, our class this past weekend, we talked about, I think she called them spirit animals. So, you know, people are going to call them whatever they're going to call them. I call them power animals. People call them guides. People call them whatever. Um, so here's how I work. For physical healing, I found it very, I'm not saying I won't get there, but I find it much more accessible somehow to do it in person. But for any other kind of work, you know, divination, soul retrieval, um, just accessing guidance, right? Just what should I do? Or what do I need to know? You know, kind of very similar questions that you might ask someone who works with the tarot, which I think is a completely right, legitimate way to work with the spirits. And many people are really good at that. It's not my thing. But so what I do is I go to my compassionate helping spirits and I say, I'm doing work for this person. Do they have a power animal or compassionate helping spirit in the upper world or lower world who is available and willing and wants to be introduced to this person? Sometimes that works. Sometimes it's, you know, that's not working for whatever reason. It almost always works. And a lot of people come to me and say, I want to find my power animal. And, you know, my sister was like, well, I think my power animal is blah, blah. And I'm like, who am I to argue? But the question to me is, so what? So if you know who your power animal is, or if you have a compassionate helping spirit in human form in the upper world, which I would argue almost probably everybody does. I mean, why would you have one and not somebody else? And honestly, I think that's where the whole kind of Christian angel thing, it came, I mean, they just took it right from the original indigenous shamanic worldview because so many people have the experience of it, right? My guardian angel. Not to mention, don't get me started on the Catholic Church. They've eliminated it now. Interesting. But it was the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. My whole childhood, I was like, what is this Holy Spirit thing? Because I feel it. And none of the nuns, I went to all girls Catholic boarding school. I wanted to be a nun. No one could explain the Holy Spirit to me. And they've eliminated that in the Catholic language now, which I find really interesting.
But you can bring back, you can help people bring back their relationship.
Well,
Indeed.
yes, yes. So I get a lot of people who feel it, like, are like, I'm having these experiences and I have no container for it. Or I stumbled over Michael Harner's book. I journeyed to the lower world and I found my power animal. And now what? What do I do with this? And people are like, oh, I want you to be my mentor and stuff. And I'm like, I'm a baby shaman. I'm not there. Not saying never say never, but I feel like I still have so much more to learn. But then I get a lot of people who, they've seen the doctors, they've seen the psychologists, the psychiatrists, they've tried the meds, they've done everything essentially. And they often come to me and they're like, I hope you have a sliding scale because I've spent every penny I have trying to get help. And my whole shamanic community tells me I have to charge.
Well, this is interesting, Madeline, because you told me before that you are considered, and you're telling us this story, that you are a shaman of last resort. It's not like
I am a
I would.
practitioner of last
Okay.
resort, right? It's like people have tried everything. So it's like, hell, I might as well try to find a shaman. Because honestly, when I first started coaching in 1989, coaching was mocked. It's not anymore so much. But now it's also now, it's like the shaman is mocked. The whole, go see a shaman. It's like, it can be a bit of a punchline to a joke, which is, who cares? It's my lot in life. Early adopter, whatever. But I have
Like
seen a
is that
lot of people where it is last resort.
what I like is that you're honestly, authentically on a path. And I think that everyone is in their own way. And I believe that you would be of great service to anyone who is on a path and needs a second opinion, another approach, a, a different point of view. And I would quibble a tiny bit about this mentor question of whether you would be a mentor, because as a master certified coach, my impression of that, without really knowing, is that you would advocate for people, that you would be on
Oh,
their side.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm happy to champion, advocate, share my experience. Um, and as a mentor coach, I will absolutely, you know, say, do this, not that, give practical advice. In the shamanic world, though, I just can't. I don't think I would give anyone advice other than do your best to find your compassionate helping spirits, listen to them, ask for help. Ask for help.
And presumably you could help people nurture their relationship with these allies.
I can help people to find them, and I can help them to understand how to nurture that relationship themselves. Right? So, and I learned a wonderful, you asked me if I wanted to share practices. Not a ton. I've studied with shamans in Mongolia and Nepal, which was really phenomenal. I got to spend 2 weeks with a guy named Bola Banstola, and we traveled and we saw how the Nepalese, and they all work totally differently, and we got to experience some extraordinary ceremony and rituals with them, and it was incredibly beautiful. But one of the things that Bola did that I loved is a way to honor your spirits, and you call them allies, and that's fine. I'm not going to be the language police, but we would sit down to a meal, and when he got his drink, this is my tea, he would take his drink and he would dip his fingers and just, for the spirits, and he would take a piece of whatever, was on his plate and put it to the side for the spirits. And it's funny, it's like a shamanic way to say grace, right? Which is a beautiful thing. I think I've always thought saying grace before a meal is one of the most beautiful things, in any culture. So that was a practice. And I think that as we all go about in our rough and tumble day, right? I think it's so easy to forget how much help is available to us. And the funny thing is, it's in all the sacred texts. Well, maybe not all, because I'm not familiar with all. But in the Torah, in the Bible, in the Quran, different phrases like knock and the door shall be opened. Ask and you shall receive. And it's just been my experience, even now, I'm 22 years into this, on this shamanic path, and I still forget. Ask, oh, right. Ask for help. And it's, so yes, I can help people to find their allies. I can help people to maybe brainstorm ways that they might be able to nurture their relationship with those allies. And I can remind people to ask for help. And one of my best friends, I did a journey for her years and years ago, and she has an extraordinarily powerful, compassionate helping spirit in the upper world in human form. And I introduced them. And sometimes she calls me and she's like, oh, I need advice. I need this, I need that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, have you asked? I'm not going to say his name, but he shared his name, which they don't always do. Or sometimes they share a nickname and they don't reveal their real names until you've kind of demonstrated your commitment to the relationship almost. It's not that different, right, from any relationship that we have with each other, with people here in ordinary reality. It's like the friendships you invest in are the friendships that grow. It's not different at all, actually. One of the things I I feel like I really did learn through the FSS is there aren't that many rules, but there are some. And, there are a lot of people out there, including people in my own community, who have very clear ideas about rules. And I've never been a big rule follower. Or I guess I would say I'm one that I like to understand what the rules are and why they're there and how I can break them if I need to without causing any damage. That's more my approach with rules. So a lot of people have shared rules with me that I'm like, yeah, not buying that one. Because it so clearly comes from a human and not from the spirits.
What are some spirit rules?
That, well, it's their rule. They can't help us unless we ask them to. Like our hands are tied. We are here. We are ready to help, but we can't help unless you ask. And once I asked, I have a main compassionate helping spirit who's like my guy. My air traffic controller, I always go to him first, and then he takes me to other people's power animals or compassionate helping spirits, or to others who have introduced themselves to me. And he's like, oh yeah, we should go over to this spirit and that spirit, whatever. Anyway, and I asked, and I'm like, why can't you just help me when I think I need help? Why do I have to say it out loud? And he said, Madeleine, come on, really? Can you imagine if we actually tried to respond to all the, I don't want to use, swear words, but to all the crap that goes on in your head? Can you imagine the chaos? I was like, that's a really good point, right? So we have to say it out loud, because by the time we've processed it enough to turn it into actual language that comes out of our mouth, we are at least marginally more clear about what we're asking for. And they're not going to go off and provide us with help that comes in a form that, I've always said, if we ask for love, they will send us a dog, because so we need to be clear about what we're asking for. And sometimes it's hard for them, right? Because they're not human. And they're so far away from the human experience that it can be hard for them we can't ask them to connect the dots in a way that we would, right?
Well, I like what you're saying, Madeleine, in this part of asking for help, coming to ask for help, because there's a need that's recognized there, that perhaps we can't do it all. And I believe that's what the basis or foundation of Shamans Directory is all about, is that we're seeking help, we're seeking assistance, we're seeking allies or compassionate assistance. If someone were to come to you with a simple question or request, I need help, is that sufficient to begin work with you? Or do you need someone to know what they need help with? I'm imagining a first session with you. How might that go?
Well, people come how they come, right? And a lot of people who end up with me, not the ones who've started their own journey with shamanism, right? That's a separate thing. But people who are just like, I need help. They already have an interpretation of what kind of help they need. And how they'd like to be helped, like what would help look like. So it's fairly easy. And then I journey on their behalf, and the spirits will say, well, it's very clear to us that this person needs physical healing. So we'll do some physical healing. Or this person is ready for a soul retrieval. So we do a soul retrieval. Or this person needs to understand XYZ. Great. Sometimes they have to explain it several times so I can remember it and bring it back and put it into language, right? I mean, one woman came to me once and she was like, I I'm either leaving my marriage or I'm not. This is it. This is the moment I'm making the decision and I'm so torn. And I did a journey on her behalf. It was one of the most extraordinary metaphors they've ever shown me. And we went out into the ocean and we were on an ocean liner and the ocean liner was sinking. And my client was on, those wooden deck chairs, like from the way back in the grand days of, ocean liners, the wooden deck chairs. She was on a wooden deck chair paddling in the ocean, getting as far away from the sinking ship as she could, just paddling. And there were animals helping her pull her away because to get out of the going down with the ship. And I'm just laughing. I mean, the spirits, at least all the ones I work with, not all, but most, have really a wonderful sense of humor. And I come back and I share this. This is, this was what was shown to me. Could it be more clear? Get away. So, and a lot of people come to me and they've read somewhere about soul retrieval. Maybe they've read um, Sandra Ingerman's books or whatever, and they're like, I want to come to you for soul retrieval. I'm like, great, happy to work with you. Can't guarantee that that's what's going to happen. It's not up to me. It's up to them. It's up to the soul parts if they want to come back. And sometimes I have negotiation with soul parts and they're like, I will come back on one condition. What's the condition? Okay. So I go back, I talk to the client. This soul part has been returned to you, but it will not stay if you don't fill in the blank. So you never know. People come for physical healing and they don't get physical healing. They get something else. It's not up to me, you know.
Well, one thing I'm hearing, Madeleine, is that working with you may be quite the adventure because you never really know what the form of a session or guidance or a relationship would look like, and I like that. I like an approach that is open to the moment and to the guidance you seek and receive. I guess what I would ask, just as we're closing here, is if um, if you see that Shamans Directory is a circle of experienced practitioners, each having their own gifts, how would you begin to describe your gift? What is your offering to the fire? And I don't mean to confine you in any way, but I'm just asking if you were to start to describe, a unique gift of yours, or what your approach or offering to the fire might be, where would you begin?
I'm very good at going to speak with the dead. That's something I've actually had a tremendous amount of success with. And at least in the FSS, they call it Psychopomp, which in essence is going to people who have died, but who are stuck in ordinary reality in the middle world, and who need assistance to process to wherever it is that they need to go next. I'm very good at that, and I'm very good at going to visit with people who have passed wherever they've gone. It's just really easy for me. But that's totally different from a friend of mine in my community who's a medium. Her gift is she gets people who have passed to come here to ordinary reality to communicate with people. And I can't do that. And I guess that's, people call it medium, being a medium. I'm not that. I don't do that. And I love doing that work actually, because it's so comforting for people. People here in ordinary reality worry so much about people who've passed. Yeah.
So just one more moment on that, Madeleine. Are you finding that you could access those who have come before us who might have a special message, or are you talking more about dealing with a certain ancestor that there may be unresolved issues uh, still in play?
Oh, so far it's been kind of confined to working with unsettled spirits who need to, so clearing, when people feel that, there's so many words for those spirits, and I don't like any of them. They're just people who haven't been able to get where they're going. And I've done I'm a baby when it comes to doing ancestral work. So I wouldn't put myself out there as someone who really knows what they're doing there. I think there are a lot of people who really know what they're doing with that kind of work. So people who need ancestral healing, I think that's a whole, like, I've read the Cliff Notes, but I need to like do the program, whatever that program is. There's
What
still
would
so
you
much to learn.
what would you say your specialty is in regards to people who have passed?
Just going to visit them and either helping them process if they need to. Sometimes they're not ready. Um, but also, you know, bringing back messages.
Well, I'm glad
Oh my
we
God, I did
we
one, I did one journey for someone. It was her brother, and she didn't know if he died in an accident or if it was a suicide. So I went to see him, and he's like joking around, and he said, well, that's for me to know and for her to find out. And I'm like, well, if it's for her to find out, how how is she going to find out? And he's just smiling and laughing, and it just all of a sudden became so clear to me it wasn't intentional. He wasn't the kind of person who, he just, that it wasn't intentional. And I came back and I told her, I said he was laughing because you're such a worrywart. And he said it was for him to know and for you to find out. And she just was like, oh my God. He would always say that. That was like his thing. And he was a jokester. But she was so relieved because it was an accident and he was fine. I mean, he was bummed for her and for his family, but anyway. My gift ultimately is just working with my spirits, finding your spirits if they want to be found, and making introductions and accessing help, whatever that help is.
That's very clear, Madeline. I appreciate so much your willingness to share. When I hear you say a baby shamanism, with all due respect, I don't believe you because you are you bring so much wisdom and experience and a powerful set of resources to all the work you do. So, and that's my humble
Thank you.
opinion.
I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
Or observation, and I just wonder as we close, before I say our goodbye, is there anything further you'd like to offer? It's been a delight to hear of your process and your honest approach.
Just wait, how much I appreciate that you're doing this. It's a big wide world, right? Non-ordinary reality. And for those of us who are navigating it, there are a million ways to do it, right? And I think the more we can help each other, the more we can help all the, I mean, the need is infinite, right? There's so much suffering. So I appreciate that you're doing this. So thank you.
You're welcome, Madeline. And there's so much help to be had, and you're one of the helpers, one of the authentic support people, helpers, shamanic practitioners. You're good with vocabulary, you fill in the blank what you want to be called, but I would say you're your own helping spirit, and you could be very supportive to so many people. I do want to say then, thank you, Madeline. Thank you for today's time together. Thank you for all of those who are watching, for joining us for this Shaman to Shaman interview. This is the way, as Madeline says, this is the way we get to know one another. And we thank you for revealing yourself, for offering your own humanity, your own journey, and your own approach. If you'd like to schedule a session with Madeleine, please visit us at shamansdirectory.com and look for Madeleine Blanchard's profile. There you can also learn more about other amazing healers and teachers on the directory. Our YouTube channel will also guide you to these interviews or replays of our live events and to selected presentations from the Cosmic Fire Summit. Until next time, this is Wake. Thank you, Madeline.
Thanks, Wake.
And we'll see you around.
Okay, bye.